When you think werewolves, you probably picture sharp fangs, torn up clothes, and of course that big old glowing full moon. Classic stuff, right? But what if I told you there's a way more to these creatures than just the horror movie basics, like hidden abilities and wild lore that never made it to the big screen? Stuff that could actually turn them into way more complex and way more powerful monsters than we give them credit for. So, in this video, we're diving deep into the untapped side of werewolves, their secret powers, emotional depth, and all the supernatural goodness that usually gets left out. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request though. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Empathy. Based on their wild and vicious nature, werewolves might be among the most aggressive monstrous beings from literature or pop culture. But it seems that people forget that one of the most essential aspects of werewolves is that for them, empathy isn't just about emotional awareness, it becomes a supernatural extension of their senses. Yeah, we do imagine the amount of sensory overload the werewolf must be going through because of the vast variety of readings it utilizes. Still, apart from all those, we have this one sense that allows a werewolf to pick up on a different reading, a reading that helps them gather information about emotional states, pain, or the intent of others, and thus, it can help them sense emotional pain and form a spiritual bond with others. At an early stage, it might be quite difficult for a werewolf to recognize or even identify this ability, and they might confuse the emotion they've absorbed with something they might have. So, things might get extremely sad for them, even though it might not be the emotion they were exploring. This ability shows up in tons of shows and books, but one of the best examples? Haley Marshall from The Originals, where we could see that she experienced a lot of emotional hypersensitivity. She could feel her pack's collective agony or fear, even though it was never stated as empathy. So, one of the figures of the pack, primarily the maternal figure, ended up being a conduit for collective pain and comfort, becoming an essential part of the pack dynamics. But while it is considered a major ability, we're overlooking how it might affect the werewolf itself. Since the being can absorb these emotional notches, there's a chance that it might end up internalizing this pain to the point where it might lead to self-destruction. So yeah, younger werewolves might have a difficult time working on this ability because they haven't built up the resilience. Thus, it can burden them through all their possible states, be they mental, emotional, or even spiritual. So in a way, this ability might make prey bear their emotions in front of the werewolf, but it doesn't in any way mean that the werewolf is having the best day by absorbing those emotions. Lunar empowerment. Fans of DC Comics are well aware how the Sun and Superman have a thing where it acts as a source for his powers and often manages to bring him back from the worst conditions. Well, it seems that werewolves also seem to have an interesting parallel where the moon acts like a power incarnate to them. We have seen how the moon is associated with a werewolf, considering popular myth states that a werewolf can only be found during full moons, but the lore goes deeper than that, just unleashing the monster. Under the moon's glow, particularly the full phase, a werewolf can tap into some of the most essential aspects of its persona, making it a lot stronger, faster, tougher, and hungrier, thus making it a lot more in tune with its primal essence. Some of the most common effects of the moon are associated with a physical amplification that's quite visible on the creature, with the muscles tightening, sharpening of the reflexes, and even pain thresholds shooting through the roof, making it the worst nightmare for its prey. But there's more than just muscle growth at play because the lunar exposure allows the creature to unlock various powers available as part of the lunar package. Abilities like enhanced senses, emotional intuition, and some more powers that are flat-out supernatural in nature can be unlocked, making the werewolf peak its abilities. But above all, this is the lunar mind, an ability that allows the creature to erode any possible barrier to the mind while strengthening the body. There's an interesting parallel with the state of the moon because as the moon rises, the creature's instincts also rise to a significant level and reach a state where the beast not only loses control of itself, but also reaches a state where logic becomes irrelevant. Instincts end up doing most of the thinking bits. In such scenarios, even the most familiar faces can become threats, leading to the ultimate fight or flight mode, where flight is the least possible choice. It does sound like the wildest scenario for the creature. Still, there's an idea of control in such scenarios, particularly associated with how the werewolf gains control before going absolutely wild. But even under self-control, they feel a pull in the form of a whisper or a surge from the moon itself. The moon speaks in a language older than blood, but only the werewolves can hear it the loudest. Yes, the moon does do some talking, but only to certain people of interest. Memory transference. After diving into the ability to absorb emotions, there's a similar ability that might just come in handy for various reasons: memory transference. Even though it might just be one of the most mystifying aspects of the werewolf's powers, memory transference is another one of the abilities that just proves how deeply intimate the werewolf can be when it comes to the invasiveness of their abilities. Even though most abilities are unlocked in the most brute force pattern imaginable, this particular ability is a lot more surgical and almost psychic in nature. Using this ability, a werewolf can extract, share, and even erase memories, but the level of control indicates whether it was done forcibly or voluntarily. So, how does a werewolf proceed with the process of extracting memory from a certain individual? Well, this procedure requires a lot of precision and concentration, as the werewolf has to use its claws to penetrate the skin at the nape of the neck. If done incorrectly, there's a clear chance of neurological damage to the victim. Still, if done correctly, it's almost as if a seamless connection is established between the victim and the werewolf. Yeah, that sounds like something you would do to empty your PC, but then who would have thought that human memory storage could be accessed like this as well? Maybe proper connections result in push notifications. However, this isn't limited to humans and werewolves, as werewolves can have an advanced version of this power to do what is known as memory copying. In this case, when two werewolves have had a strong past that they've shared, they can create a copy of their memory and share it amongst each other. However, the process and energy required to replicate the memory can affect the sender significantly, almost making them weak enough to keep them exhausted for weeks. That's why this ability is used by dying elders to share some sort of wisdom with the younger werewolves, thus embedding this memory as a core one inside them. Even though this ability hasn't been explicitly shown in pop culture or other media, fans might remember a version of this existing with Talia Hale from Teen Wolf. Talia had the ability to manipulate and even erase memories using the claw-based method. It could lead to terrible circumstances in the wrong hands, but in the right ones, it could reduce the exposition a werewolf might have to go through to understand their past and powers. Resistance to normal weapons and even magic. In recent years, the lore behind creatures like vampires and werewolves has gone through some major updates. Sometimes they're made to be easily solvable cases of humans going mad under the effect of a drug, while at other times, it's entirely about some creature that can ward off bullets, blades, and even magic spells. The latter is something more common in the modern version of werewolves, wherein it's become obvious that the werewolf might just be the most dangerous part of the narrative. You might be surprised to learn that the age-old tale of werewolves in silver didn't really take hold until the 20th century with the 1941 film The Wolf Man. That entire addition to the lore came about because of the purity of the metal used in folklore that worked against witches and vampires. So it became that the beast was mostly immune to mundane harm, even supernatural harm, unless it was approached with anything that had the sacred metal, silver. Even though past films have only explored the arc of the werewolf in a setting where it's been approached with physical weapons, recent times have allowed for narratives where the beast has had the chance to go against the likes of witches or powerful wizards. Turns out that apart from gunshots, swords, or even enchantments, curses or arcane attacks are quite helpless against a werewolf. This particular example could be seen in the Witcher franchise, where the werewolves resist any type of magic. Spells that can end up crippling an ordinary person barely have any effect on a werewolf, and our very own Geralt had to prepare some sort of potion and strategize in order to bring one down. Apart from that, even if you did manage to have a silver sword on hand for that circumstance, you'd need to have the skills to use it properly and strike the beast in a particular manner, otherwise it would have no effect at all. The horror element in some modern types of werewolves allows them to escape certain scenarios because guns jam, spells fizzle out, and the werewolf keeps pouncing towards you. It's interesting to note how particular the idea of someone who can slay this beast has become, wherein they're supposed to have a certain level of cleverness, preparation, and a desperate will to fight the beast. So the next time you have a werewolf chasing you, at least try to aim for the heart. Lie detection. Imagine a scenario where you're being interrogated in the Hotel Transylvania for some criminal activity you were involved in with the worst nightmare for these kinds of ghastly beings, Van Helsing. Do you think they would require a polygraph to get the truth out of you? In most cases, they probably wouldn't, because they probably have something better to get the truth out of you. But you might be surprised to learn that a werewolf is kind of a polygraph in and of itself. With a couple of heightened senses and abilities to pick up the tiniest details, the werewolf can smell a lie right out of you. It's not associated with some supernatural factor for the beast, still it is much akin to a polygraph because a werewolf can do hyper-physiological reading in real time. There are a lot of factors that have been studied as the most obvious signs of someone who's lying. The pulse quickens, the scent changes, and the rhythm of the breath catches up ever so slightly whenever a person lies. Like Sherlock Holmes, human beings could pick up some of these factors, but a werewolf with senses that have been honed beyond human thresholds can pick up on every micro-reaction. If you've ever heard a song and felt there was a drum beat that was out of sync, that's exactly how it feels to be a werewolf. Scott McCall from Teen Wolf has been able to pick up on these nuances like skipping or accelerating heartbeats, thus making it rather difficult for him to lie or even have regular conversations. Sometimes he can pick up if someone is holding something back, even if they're absolutely silent, but that's also something that can make a human being an easy target because there are always human errors, as not every heartbeat is a liar's heartbeat. After all, during your interrogation at the Hotel Transylvania, you're not going to be in the best condition to give straight answers, and the werewolf might pick up on the wrong beats, and there goes your life. So, in the end, we can clearly see that the werewolf's lie detector isn't really about some mythical or supernatural power, it's just about being a primal listener. There's a chance that you can even hone this ability without being a werewolf. All you have to do is listen. Weather immunity. Weather can be a real hurdle sometimes, as it can completely destroy a particular process because of harsh rains, heavy winds, and whatnot. It becomes a force to be reckoned with, and thus you're generally required to be able to brave it out, endure it, or avoid it completely. But the same can't be said for werewolves because thunder, rain, snow, lightning, searing heat, and even choking fog, none of these things can slow them down and become a threat to them. Now that's weather immunity, one of the core aspects of their primal connection to the wild. It might seem obvious and a simple fact, but if you dig deeper, you would realize that it's more than just another physical advantage for the creature. Werewolves aren't just a part of the nature in which they exist, they're the ones who are supposed to thrive in it, no matter how brutal it is for any of us. So a blizzard might blind you and me, but it might be nothing for a werewolf because their vision can pierce through the whiteout and their paws can find stable footing and keep on with their hunt. Similarly, lightning, something that's been known to kill humans, hardly does any damage to a werewolf as it can pass right through their body with minimal disruption because of their advanced regenerative reflexes that kick in instantly. You might remember that in the Witcher franchise, werewolves are often found in environments that seem too ruthless for human beings, but these creatures roam the winter wastelands without any effect on their ferocity or their energy. So the next time you wonder whether the forest will probably level the playing field for you and a werewolf, you're deeply wrong, my friend, and there's a clear chance that you're paving the way for your obvious death, either by some natural phenomenon or at the hands of a werewolf. We often wonder how an interaction between a predator and a werewolf would turn out, because they'd both probably try to best each other, and that's the catch. Would the predator set traps to hunt down the werewolf in its territory? It'd be an absolute blast to witness for sure. Shadow cloaking. Sticking to the abilities that nature provides them with while also involving some supernatural elements, there are times when werewolves appear almost attuned to the darkness of the night, as if it's a second skin to the creature. This is basically what you might call shadow cloaking, and it's not exactly invisibility, but something a lot more subtle and ancient, while sticking to the primal instincts of the creature. To an untrained eye, one can say that the werewolf has simply disappeared from the scene, but those who know better might just feel that heaviness in the air and the cold shadows surrounding them. In fact, this ability is also linked to the lunar relation because the brighter the moon, the sharper the edges of the creature will blur into the shadows. Over the years, various documentary teams have tried to catch hold of their favorite monsters, but only got to see them at times where we see just a blur or a mere shadow couldn't really prove anything solid. But how is that possible? Werewolves can basically cloak some of their abilities in a way that dulls the observer's instincts. People will completely overlook some rather minute details, animals will just become uncertain instead of reacting to a threat, and cameras, well, you might get a blurry picture if you're lucky, but you're not going to get something that's a concrete record of this creature. It's part of the camouflaging capability that a cub or some other creature might use to protect itself during a particular scenario. But imagine the same ability with a reversed purpose, where the individual uses it to hunt down their enemy without making their presence felt. Occasionally, rituals are used to allow a werewolf to completely assimilate itself with the darkness, making it even more difficult to see, but that costs something, and it often results in the werewolf completely losing themselves to the forest and becoming one with the woods. So next time you're going by the woods and feel as if something's watching you, you might not just be paranoid.
The beast will have its day. The beast beast will out.
Scene reconstruction. Let's talk about another major ability associated with nature that clearly indicates why werewolves could, in fact, be very good detectives if given the chance. As we've seen so far, werewolves can be clearly regarded as beasts who have the gift of connecting to nature itself, making them far superior in adapting to their environment than you might imagine. But that's just the beginning, because this natural connection allows them to read landscapes like a living and breathing memory archive. Basically, the werewolf can observe the residual energy of a place and peel back through the layers of time to visualize what might have happened, thus tracking someone based on the smallest lingering bits of their essence. But it might not just be about exploring something from the past. Instead, it could explore what might be happening in the present by connecting with the neural network of the area formed by the forest. The fluttering of a bird in a particular manner at a particular area might have a chain reaction that can allow the werewolf to instantly detect a presence or a specific activity that they would like to cover up. It's almost as if the werewolf can reconstruct a particular crime scene and thus pick up on the nitty-gritty situation and use it to track down their enemy further. But it's not only about hunting down an enemy, and the ability could even be used as a means of finding lost pack members or sensing oncoming danger. To rephrase Bane, you think nature is your ally. In fact, some werewolves don't think of this ability as a tool, but instead as a sacred right. The ability to speak to a forest is truly sacred, and we don't deserve this ability. Dreamwalking, or astral projection. But the woods aren't the only places where a werewolf might haunt you, because there's a chance they might enter a whole new realm to prevent you from going to sleep. We all know that these creatures are purely physical and are beasts of muscle and feral rage, but there's a deeper secret that might not be considered as important, often because of how much more haunting it might be for an individual. Some ancient werewolves with really ancient bloodlines have the rare ability of dreamwalking, which involves stepping out of the body and going into the realm of sleep. This ability can enable the beast to leave its physical form behind and enter the dreams, memories, or any such spiritual landscape of an individual. How does a werewolf acquire this ability? Well, it might look like something that involves some sort of brute force, the kind that's often associated with the creature, but it's more about the rhythms of the moon, the pulse of the earth, and the emotional bonds between beings. Being a creature of the night, it's almost as if the creature can get a ticket from the Sandman to enter the mind of an individual with whom the beast might have some sort of emotional bond. Maybe they performed one of those memory exchange things and left a back door through which the werewolf could enter and exit whenever they wanted. What's really entertaining is the werewolf can use this ability to watch some dreams or memories play out like a theater while they enjoy some version of popcorn. But at the same time, they can use this ability to warn the individual or offer some sort of guidance in a situation as a last-minute move. Yeah, that means bonding with a werewolf at all makes you extremely vulnerable to this sort of thing. That's why you must steer away from anything like that before you get too involved. Shapeshifting versatility. In the world of shapeshifters, werewolves surely hold a major spot because they don't just transform into a beast, they're quite layered and have a lot of consequences that one might overlook. There's either the man or the beast, the two sides of the coin that they jump back and forth from. But there's another state, a humanoid wolf form, half beast and half man, the best of both or the worst of both. It's basically about duality. What if you had to hold on to the human self while allowing the beast to take over the other aspects of you? In fact, this might sound very familiar because one of the Avengers recently came into a similar state after going through years and years of battle with his own identity. We're talking about Bruce Banner, or his other identity, the Hulk, another one of the most popular shape-shifting monsters. When Banner becomes the Hulk, he is the least himself he knows, and it might lead to grave situations because the Hulk becomes an expression of every single bit of rage that's suppressed in Banner. But there's more to that than you might have noticed, because Banner has often argued with the Hulk about who should be in control. Until recently, we witnessed him in a form where he existed in a gradient human brain with the body of the Hulk. Similarly, the hybrid form of the werewolf is one where both the human and the beast coexist in a gradient. So basically, the humanoid is the werewolf version of Professor Hulk, having all the powers without surrendering to the primal instincts. Even though it might sound really cool, just like Bruce Banner, it takes a lot of practice to adapt to. That's because the nature of the primal being might not be too keen on a half-and-half deal. It's not only about power, it's more about what it costs to stay in control when the primal instincts of the beast kick in. So be proud of hybrid werewolves because they managed to fight the fight that matters. Marvelous verdict! We love the fact that most of these abilities come from the fact that werewolves are so closely attuned to nature and how their heightened senses allow them to bond with nature in a way that paves the way for some amazing powers. Low-key, we're still kind of stuck on the idea of a werewolf going against a predator because that might just be one of the best horror crossover movies of all time. It's something that fans of both creatures would enjoy. So next time you see a werewolf on screen, check if the creature has any of these extremely rarely portrayed abilities. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.